All right, so a quick review of some important concepts that we saw in Siman Tzadik Beis that will also help us in Tzadik Gimel and further in Hilchos Basar בחלב. Plus, it will help us understand some interesting halachas in Hilchos Shabbos, in Shin Yud Ches and Reish Nun Gimel. If you're interested in those Simanim, the Mishnah Berurah has some interesting information about some situations that come up, that can come up on a Shabbos, and how this relates to. After all, we're dealing with heat, we're dealing with bishul, and we have to be concerned about it. It's no longer just a matter of Isser and Heter. It's also a matter of, is this an Av Melacha or not? Av Melacha, in other words, one of the 39 Avos Melachos is a Deraisa. Sure, if it's a told, sure. Definitely. So, real quickly, just to review a little bit of what we covered, Irui, which is basically liquid that's falling off, coming down from the original kli that was on the fire. It doesn't have to be. I mean, Irui can be the actual pe'ula, the actual act of being poured from something that was not a kli rishon. But for purposes of the halacha of Irui, when we say this is Irui, we're talking about a problematic Irui. The problematic Irui is coming from a kli rishon.
Is that why it's called Kli Rishon?
That's what it's called, exactly. If we give it the entire name, the full title, it's Irui Kli Rishon. Thank you, yeah. And what is a Kli Rishon? A Kli Rishon can be, and usually is, a Kli that was on top of the fire. Not only was it on top of the fire, it actually became quite hot, more than Yatsa Ledesboy. And even though the fire is no longer lit, or even if that Kli Rishon that was on the fire was removed, it still continues to have the title of Kli Rishon, albeit it is now not clear. It's now called Kli Rishon Shehusar Me'al Ha'esh, that has been removed from the fire. It has a slightly different title, but it's still a Kli Rishon for certain things. For not only for a certain time, as long as it's very, very hot, but for certain things it can make a big difference. About can I add in Shabbos? Can I add certain things to it? Somehow I think I didn't put enough spices in it. Even before I taste it, I'm not going to taste it, it's too hot to taste. You just can't add things to a Kli Rishon. You may not even be able to add certain things, perhaps even to a Kli Sheni. So Kli Rishon is definitely more chomer than a Kli Sheni, even if it's off the fire. So we said that Irui comes in between a Kli Rishon and a Kli Sheni. And obviously, Kli Sheni or Kli Shlishi basically means that the liquid or the solids are cooling off as they're being transferred, or as time progresses. That too. As time progresses, everything will cool off. But the mere fact that something has been transferred over to another keli means that somehow when it lands in the other keli, the dafnois keli, it's not just because it's being poured, even though the pouring means that it's going through the air, which is also a question if that in itself does something to cool off the liquid. But it's more than the pouring, it's the actual walls of the new vessel, the plate, the cup, whatever, or the pot, that is actually cooling off the liquid as it's coming down. And that is why Kli Sheni or Kli Shlishi is always going to be, even though it's almost one after another, as you will see with some people when they want to have tea on Shabbos with tea bags. And tea bags is a problem because it's considered one of those things that is kalei abishul. Kalei abishul means there are certain things that we know for a fact will cook with very little heat. Quickly. Certain fish, tea leaves, it's kalei. It's very, very light. It doesn't need that much cooking. It's not meat. It needs a lot of hot cooking. So because of kalei abishul, because of that chashash, we don't, that in other words, that these leaves may be in the category of kalei abishul, we don't even use them in a Kli Sheni. Because even though we hold the halacha the Kli Sheni and the mevashel, nevertheless, with kalei abishul there's the chashash. It's a chashash.
Because you don't need so much heat?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Kli Sheni, normally the argument by Kli Sheni is there isn't enough heat to
be mevashel.
But something that doesn't need so much heat, so
exactly.
it doesn't help you there.
Exactly. So therefore, how do you make tea on Shabbos to avoid this problem? You have several choices. One, use nest tea. Nest tea is a bottle that contains the powder of tea.
Pre-cooked?
Pre-cooked. I mean, it's already pre-processed. whenever I tell Israelis, I says, what's that? You have Nescafe, so there's something called Nesti.
But it doesn't taste it.
It doesn't taste this. Yeah. Anyway, of course, that's why they don't use it. You can prepare the essence before Shabbos. You know what that is, right? By putting several bags.
Like the Russians, the samovar.
Right.
That's always, the whole week long, they use tea essence. They have a little kettle.
Is that right? Yeah, the whole thing.
contains
You're
tea
right. Yeah, the
essence
whole week actually.
That stands on top of the big kettle that contains
Yes.
the boiling water, and that's how they make tea.
And what's the advantage of this? You already have cooked those tea bags. So even the tea bag can be used again if you really want to. But it's not the tea bag that's going to be used. It's going to be the essence, the concentrated essence of the many tea bags that will hopefully last you for a good amount of cups of tea. In other words, you're going to be pouring liquid into that glass of hot water instead of putting back.
So you're going to pour first the hot water
Yes.
in, and then you're going to add the liquid. Because liquids, there
It's
is
cold.
special prohibition. By liquid, you have...
Yeah, the liquid now, if the liquid, very good point. If the liquid is cold in the essence, and some people maintain it warm,
Yeah,
so
the
it should,
samovar.
right, so it should not be a problem of liquid having become cooled off. Because there is a shita that liquids, and we'll talk about that soon, a liquid that has been cooled off completely can be recooked, as opposed to the other shita, right? The Rambam, I think, that once water has been cooked, even if it's completely cooled off, you can't recook it. In other words, it's not also to read it.
There's no bishul ha-bishul.
There's no bishul achar bishul.
But we don't pass like
We don't pass like that. Now, the mechaber paskins, since we're already talking about this point, that if the liquid even cooled off a little bit, it's no longer hot.
Does yatsoledet?
Yeah.
It's the threshold?
No, yeah, that's the threshold. If it's not hot, in other words, you can't warm it, you can't recook it to bring it to that level. And the Ramah is of the opinion, is more of a compromise, that as long as it's lukewarm and it's not completely cooled off, you may use it in various situations that may involve a kli rishon. In other words, we will not be concerned that this liquid that has cooled off a little bit is going to be reheated. And this makes a difference, of course, in Hilchos Shabbos quite a bit. So therefore, as far as the liquid is concerned, as far as the essence, if you keep it warm, then it's okay. If it's completely cooled off, it's cold essence, you want to pour the hot water from your urn into the glass first, because once it has landed in the glass, everybody's going to be of the opinion that that hot water that is now in a glass is a klisheni.
So it no longer has the power to cook something.
Right. It's not, now we're not dealing with the question of the irui as the water is coming down. Once it has landed, of course, that water will now be a klisheni. Because it's in a klisheni, it's no longer in the kli rishon. It has landed, it's not flowing, it's not irui. Okay, so therefore, once the water is down, it's now, I can put the cooled off essence into the glass, because even though tato govar, and the bottom is very, very hot, but it's klisheni she'eino mevashel. Right? Klisheni is not going to, so I don't, whereas if I were to put the essence first and then pour on it, I'm running into the problem of irui and kli rishon, which is mevashel kedei klipa, which is a problem in Shabbos too. Klipa is we may make of it nothing in Nisra V'Heter, it's only a klipa, but in Shabbos a klipa is a problem too.
It's the whole problem.
It's
a bishul of a klipa.
Exactly,
Bishul,
klipa.
You're over, with respect to the klipa, you're over on bishul.
Exactly, yeah.
It's not only a little bit of a
That's
problem.
correct. So therefore we want to avoid that, so it's better in the case of water having been cooled off completely to put the essence, I'm saying, the liquid has been cooled off completely, to put it after the water is in the glass.
Why
Yes.
can't you put the klisheni?
Okay, that's the third option. We were speaking about the first option, which was what? The first option is nesti. The Persians definitely don't want to use nesti. Says that's not tea.
Do the Persians,
Yeah.
actually, the Persians have also something similar.
Yes.
Do they also have a tea essence kettle
Yes.
in there?
Yeah.
So that's basically the same.
That sits on top. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's basically the same, like
Exactly like the Russians. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. In other words, it's been already pre-cooked, prepared before Shabbat, and you don't have that problem. So that was the second option. The third option, they say, is okay. Let's say you don't have anything. You didn't prepare. You're in the mood of a tea. So klisheni could be mevashel kalei bishul, but it will not be mevashel. Kalei bishul will not be such a problem if it's in a kli shlishi.
for those who hold klishli agrees that there's
But basically, that's the opinion. The opinion holds that even though we're machmir on klisheni, that's the consensus. We may be machmir on klisheni for kalei bishul, In other words, we're strict. Kli sheni in itself is a whole sugya. Okay, so we're mekel, that it's not mevashel, but kalei bishul we're concerned. So kli shlishi should not be a problem with kalei bishul. Why should it be? It's already has cooled off so much that it should not be a problem.
So obviously it can't be yatzoledet.
What?
What if it's a yatzoledet?
Regardless of the yatzoledes. The yatzoledes does not make the determination here.
It's definitional.
Right. It could still be yatzoledes.
Really?
Yeah. Yatzoledes is not the ultimate determination when it comes to kli sheni or shlishi. It has lost the koach. And as the Chazon Ish, I think, also explains it. The walls of the keli cool off the effect.
Yeah, that's the change.
Yeah. It cool it off so much, and without regard to yatzoledes. That's what I recall.
So it removes its koach to
It's
the
koach,
mevashel.
right.
That is normally said with bishul.
Yeah. So kalei bishul is a problem with kli sheni. It also has to be because kli sheni in itself is a big suffix. It's a suffix. I mean, we have shitas on kli sheni too. It's not so simple. It's only one level removed from a kli rishon. It's very close to an irui, right? But kli shlishi is very far, is more removed, and by the time it lands in a kli shlishi, it has lost its effect. Now, does it say how long you have to wait? No. So therefore, here, we took a glass, we poured hot water from the urn, we poured it, that's a kli sheni. Okay, we poured it into a second glass, and I tell people, just to be on the safe side, pour it into a third glass again. Why? Because as it's coming down, you have an irui water, So what's the big deal if you put it into a third glass? And I think that third glass, nobody should argue with that. I mean, unless you argue about the tea, the coloration of the water and other issues, there should be no problem using a tea bag if you really want it with a kli shlishi. And even then, you would put the bag after the water has landed in the glass, not before. You don't want the water landing on the tea. Okay, because what have we seen so far? That the water that's coming down is always going to be hotter than the water that has settled. So we always want to be on the safe side. So you will notice people having the water come down on the first glass and then putting the Nescafe, the coffee, not Turkish coffee, Nescafe and sugar after the water is down. You don't really need to do that with coffee. Why? Because the coffee is processed already, it's cooked. You can put the coffee into the glass, the empty glass, with the sugar, coffee that has been processed, sugar that has been processed, and you can pour hot boiling water on top of it. Why? Because ain't bishul achar bishul. This is clear. Elamai, there are some who are machmir that nevertheless it's better to pour the hot water first and then to put your coffee in. All right. But that's a chumrah. It's not really a requirement. If you hold that the coffee is really cooked, then there shouldn't be any problem. All right. So we discussed that irui is a little bit more of a problem than kli sheni, because irui is coming from a kli rishon directly. And the question is, what is the status of that irui? A distinction is apparently made by the Ramah and others on whether this irui was nifsaka kiluach or no nifsaka kiluach. It appears to be, and it's pretty much common sense, that irui shelo nifsaka kiluach, that the flow is continuous, is a form of nitzuk chibor. It's a form of it's still connected to the original source, and it definitely has more strength. Somehow, if there is a hafsak, an interruption in the kiluach, in the flow, then there's a little bit of cooling off, losing its impetus, losing some of the heat. All right. So that distinction apparently is made, and it could make somewhat of a difference in Isur V'Heter, in Shabbos too, if it's Nifsek HaKoluach or Nifsek HaKoluach. But for the most part, we're not really machalik. We don't really make that much of a difference. I think the Chazon Ish holds that we don't really make a chilukim between Nifsak versus Lo Nifsek HaKoluach, even though there's sometimes it could make a difference. We talked about Meligat Ha'of in Siman Samach Ches. It's a situation where people used to pour hot water on top of chickens that still have their feathers on, in order to enable them to more easily remove the feathers. That's called Meligat Ha'of. So of course that's a problem. Lechatchila, you don't want to do that. Why don't you want to do that? Because we're talking about a chicken that has not been salted yet. And here, if you pour hot boiling water, you may be causing a problem. You may be extracting some of the blood, and perhaps some of that blood might go back in, and if it does, you will never be able to get it out with salt again. Once the chicken has been somewhat cooked to a certain degree, the salt is not going to work, right? So therefore, you have to be careful. So the Mechaber says that you don't want to do that. The question is, what happens if it was done anyway, b'di'evet? Okay, so that's the question over there, that it may be a problem, kedei klipa, only a little bit, not much of a problem, because even if you say that it's a problem, the irui that you're pouring can only maybe take out a little bit of the blood. It cannot do two pe'ulos. Irui does not have the power to do two actions, take out and to be mavliya at the same time. Remember we spoke about that a little bit in Kovush also, or in Klisheni. Even if you hold it could do something, it cannot do both. It cannot do both at the same time. So obviously what we see is that Irui is obviously not like Kli Rishon completely. Nevertheless, we're machmer because of all sorts of situations. There in Melicha Sa'ov, you have the problem in that particular example where the fat, the chalev, the forbidden chalev was not removed yet. So you're going to be cooking it with the chalev. You want to be menaker. You want to take off the chalev. You want to take off. Well, in the case of chicken, that's not a problem. But yeah. Well, yes, there's certain parts of the animal. The chicken, that's not the problem. Chicken is only the problem of Melicha, really. The Ikar problem is the Melicha. Unless you have internal organs that you haven't removed, that's a separate problem. You always want to remove the internal organs. Sometimes people forget, they buy a chicken, and inside the chicken is a little plastic bag with all the internal organs. You don't want to cook that together with the internal organs that have not been barbecued, there was no tzli to remove their blood. It's going to answer the whole chicken, or at least a part of the chicken. Yeah. So anyway, irui is hot. Irui is definitely an issue, and the machlokes that we discussed last time was whether was the various shitas, whether it's mevashel kuloi, like the Ri, who says irui is like Kli Rishon completely, or like Rabbeinu Tam, that it's mafli to mavliya, both. But it's only oiser kedei klipa. It does not go as far as being oiser kuloi. Mafli to mavliya, yes, to take out and to take in, but it's only kedei klipa. The Rosh holds like that, the Rashba holds like that. That's as far as irui will go. Then we had the Ran that said that irui only makes a difference, really. It makes a difference whether it was on liquid or solids. On liquids, pouring irui on liquids, the liquids will just neutralize it, cool it off. But if you're pouring irui on solids, that's the Shita Saran. That it makes a big difference. That it's like it's going to cook it. What's interesting about solids is that even if a solid that was removed from a Kli Rishon and it's now in a Kli Shina, it has still a din of Kli Rishon. A hot potato. Why do they call it a hot potato? This is a hot potato. A potato stays hot. It's a solid. It retains the heat, even though you moved it from here and you put it into something else. It's not like liquid that cools off, right? Solids don't cool off as fast. So even though you may be able to pour something into liquid, into a soup, which is in a klisheni, you may not be able to do so on a solid in a klisheni, because that solid may be still retaining the din of Kli Rishon, unless that solid is no longer Yatzalet as well. Okay, so that's another point about solids, yeah.
We spoke about the oven, that let's say, potato, usually you put them in the oven, and then let's say if you make a pizza inside the oven.
Okay.
Can you put that? You mentioned yes, but just cover up the whole thing in the...
What do you want to do? You want to make pizza in the oven?
Right, that is a flesh.
That is a fleshike oven. Right. Okay, and at the time you're making pizza, there's no flesh, there's no meat inside.
No, absolutely, for a few days.
Okay, then there's no problem. You want to make sure the oven is clean from gravy of the meat, obviously. You want to make sure the oven is clean. And lechatchila, you don't want to, and you should not really use that oven on that day for meat.
No, of course.
Right. No. So a day or more has passed by since the last time you used it for meat. You can use it for melichas. No problem.
Those racks that if you put it...
No, we're not talking about putting it on the rack itself directly. On the rack, we're talking about putting it. No. We're talking about putting it on a tray that will be sitting on the racks.
Right, correct.
Because even though the racks are not have what's called a tam lifgam, which we'll talk about in the next siman, the concept of tam lifgam, when 24 hours went by, and according to some shitas, even if one night, remember that? Went by, the tam that's there is pogum. This makes a big difference in Basar bechalv and in Isurim. So even though there's still a din of lechatchila, let's say a keli is already a week old, you can't use it. That's what Siman Tzadik Gimel about. You can't use it for melichis if it's fleishik. Oh, but it's nice in tam lefgan, not lechatchila, right? So putting something directly on those racks that have not had libun, which is what they would require real libun to make them kosher for another use of melichik, you can't put it. But you can put on a tray, because the tray is going to be touching metal. It's metal with metal, and as long as there's no residue. Remember, if there's residue, the residue is a ba'in that does not become pogum, right? So if there is ba'in, the ba'in doesn't become pogum. Right. It's tam that is within the keli or the metal that can become pogum, but not ba'in. So you want to make sure it's clean.
How about if you put aluminum foil? Would that be sufficient?
Yes, that should be sufficient.
The tray you're talking.
That's what some people do also. Yeah.
The tray you're talking about, the tray that contains pizza, or the tray that cover first that rack.
Well, I don't know of a tray that covers a rack. A rack is usually racks of metal, right?
Metal. So
right.
Cover that
Anything. That's what Elon was saying. You could put aluminum foil
on the rack.
On the rack.
Then put that tray on it.
Directly. Yeah, directly on it. Because the aluminum foil is acting like a tray.
Right. What if you have racks?
A higher and a lower.
A higher and a lower?
Sure.
Remove the
You have to remove one of the racks.
Why would you need to remove one?
Because
the steam going up or whatever from the
you have to
pizza.
cover that.
Between the two racks. You put it on the top rack.
How is that different
No.
from a single rack?
No. What would be the problem? In other words, you have two racks. You're putting the pizza on the lower rack.
Right.
There's nothing in the above rack. It hasn't been used for a couple of days, and it's clean. There wouldn't be a problem. What you're saying is there may be a problem. There's zayah going up from the pizza, possibly, even though the dairy doesn't have as much zayah as meat. But let's say some steam is going up. It can only affect the metal rack. It will not come back down. Right? If that was, we were concerned with zayah going up and coming back down.
But what about using that same metal rack later for flashing?
So that's the problem that we have with an oven being used for both, for dual purposes. If it's not the same day and it's clean, we're not concerned. Remember, the idea here is two things. It's not the same day, so whatever time is pogum. Plus, there's no ba'in. There's no zayah. It's clean.
But what we said, that we can't put the pizza directly on the rack.
Lechatchila, right?
Right. You have to
Sure.
put aluminum foil, a tray, or whatever.
Sure.
Now that the zayah, now, is there enough idea of a zayah going up from pizza to the upper rack?
And drawing out the time?
No, not drawing out the time.
Yeah.
That later, when I want to put meat on the upper rack, I need to use a tray again because now the upper rack is a din of milchik.
No, not if you wait a day. Remember, right? This oven has been used for fleshik, and there was some gravy that has poured all over the place, as it always happens, right? You still can use it.
But I have to put a aluminum foil or rack on the tray. I have to tray on the rack.
Yeah, because you don't put it directly on the racks which have not had.
If I have zayah going up from the bottom to the top rack, I'm going to put meatloaf
in a pot.
So I need to,
You're going to put it in a pot.
So I need to put a tray again.
No, you don't do it. You need to because you're putting the meat in a pot.
Well, if I put it in a pot, then it's not a tray.
Or a tray.
What does it matter if I call it a pot or a tray?
Right. I'm saying you're always putting the meat not directly. You're right. You're not putting the meat directly on the rack for the same reason.
Bare ribs.
Right, for the same reason. I see what you're saying.
Potatoes on
yes.
For flesh. Let's say you're having a fleshy and you just put it on the rack.
Yes, you can. Yeah, potatoes, yes.
And now you're going to have the potatoes. He wants to have it with fly shake.
Yeah, but it depends. If you're going to have the potato with meat, then I wouldn't. No. Just want to have parve, then it's okay. Parve potatoes, a parve lunch with salad and potato. But if you're going to have that potato, you want to have it with meat. You can't if within that day you use that. Right.
Why don't you say not pertinent potato?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So you could not pertinent would permit.
Yeah, but then there's a difference between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim. Once you talk about, so that's why I didn't get into that. Yeah. Yeah, that's why I didn't want to get into that. We'll eventually get into it. All right. So again,
but when I said he's Iranian, there's a question.
Yeah.
So which one does he follow?
The good
it's
thing
fine.
that Iran is the border with Russia.
Yeah, well, it depends which border. You know.
Caspian Sea.
On the west, they have Iraq, so they're Sephardic. Depends which border.
And, Azerbaijan, those countries.
On the north, they have parts of Russia. All right, but anyway, the last Shita in Irui was the Rashbam, who held that Irui from a clear rishon is not mevashel. It's not even mafre to mavliya. It's not even aser kedei klipa, the most lenient Shita in Irui. All right, so what we said was, as a result of this various Shitas, Seif Tes, the last Seif of Siman Tzadik Beis in Hilchos Basar B'Chalav, concerns a form of Irui that requires, because of the Irui that occurred, it requires a very unique kind of action on our part. And we're dealing with a ner shel chelev, right? We were talking about a candle that they used, at least in Eastern Europe, was used in back then, made out of forbidden fats. Right. Now, these forbidden fats, you can't consume it, but you can have hana from it. It's not basar b'chalav. You can have hana from a nevela. You can sell it to the goy, right? So there's no problem using chelev as long as you're careful that this chelev does not drip into your soup, which occasionally has happened because of close proximity on the Shabbat table. Yeah, falling into the soup, right? And then causing a problem. Right. So this halacha in Siftes is taken from the Truma Sedeshin that makes a distinction between a drop of chelev coming down directly from the solid part of the candle versus a drop coming off the liquid, the hot burning liquid or wax, or in this case it's not wax, it's chelev, because if it's coming directly from the liquid, from the hot liquid, then it's a form of irui shelo nifsaka kiluach, versus the drop that's falling off the solid part resembles more nifsaka kiluach because of the amount of heat. One is not as hot as the other one, and the fact that it's also a tipa. I saw somebody explain the fact that it's only a tipa also makes a little bit of a difference. A tipa is not as significant in the amount of heat that it could contain. But anyway, coming off the solid candle is less of a problem than coming off the hot liquid. So the Mechaber, basically just quoting the halacha, says that too, that if it came off, dripped on a keli, ein tzorech kim greda, all it requires is greda, and we will talk about that in a minute. But if it's coming from chelev mehuta cham shenofel menotipa kli tzorech hagola, if it's actually coming from the melted chelev directly from the hot liquid, then it would require hagola on the keli. Okay, I mean, obviously it may not have aser the whole keli, but part of it became aser, and that part, grade is not enough, you do hagola to it. If you can do hagola. There's a question, what if you can't do hagola? With clay cheres, we don't do hagola. So that's why we need to know the source of the halacha to understand, does Iru make that much of a difference? That we're going to have to be machmir and break this clay cheres? Clay cheres, you can't do hagola. A little bit of the chelev dripped on it. So there are halachas, tshuvas that deal with China that you inherited. We spoke about it, remember?
I thought you meant China.
Not mainland China, no. I don't think you're going to inherit them.
Yeah.
So porcelain, right? Very, very expensive that you inherited or you bought, or very expensive, and they were used by people that you don't think were careful in basar b'chalav or even kashrus. Can you use them? So there is a famous tshuva about waiting a year, not a day, and not a week, a full year, for a whole year to go by. There's even a possibility of making hagola, like the Ashkenazim do with glass, which is a suffix in itself, and if you can do it for Pesach purposes. So there are ways that one can be possibly lenient with this kind of a situation where a whole entire year has gone by, when there is a suffix b'chlal, if there is isser there. And some would even say even if there's no suffix. Especially when we're dealing with, in our case here we're dealing with also, remember, a very, very little amount, possibly a tipa that fell, where usually most kelim would probably have shishim against it anyway, if it's only a tipa. So even if you were to leave it alone, the problem is like this, as we will be learning in Siman Tzadik Gimel, most pots, and we've covered this before in Taaruvot, most pots do not have shishim against the contents in the. Remember
the
that?
content doesn't have against the walls of the pot.
I'm sorry, the other way. Thank you. Yeah. Most pots, the contents in most pots are usually not shishim keneged the walls of the pot. So if that is a pot that is usser, or if it's a fleishike pot, which means it's really heterobala, but you're cooking milk into it now, makes no difference. It's still, you may not have, usually you don't have, and you need the shishim to cancel out any tam in the gdera. Somebody by mistake just cooked milk or milk dish in a fleishike pot that was used that morning. So forget about Eino Ben Yom right now. It was really used that day. So it's going to be a problem. Somebody's going to ask you, what do I do now? I cooked melichiks in a fleishike pot that was used for fleishiks that morning. Forget about the day before, which you have, right? You usually are not going to have shishim in that pot connected the walls of the keli. So unless, there are times you may have. What are those? It's a very thin wall, very broad keli.
Or you know how much meat.
Oh, very good. Which we'll see in Siman Tzadik Dalet. Or you actually know how much meat was used within the past 12 hours that you're concerned about. In other words, you actually know the amount that was used. Well, there's not more within the walls than the amount that was used.
12.
Because if it's 24 hours or more, then it's a less, right?
Over 24, it wouldn't be a problem.
It would. I just thought
18 hours or 16.
it could have been 19. I just used. Yeah, I just said less than 24 hours. Once something is,
see.
once
You didn't mean it as
a real number. No,
you didn't mean
as
it
an example.
as the border line.
Right, no.
You just meant it as an
As an
illustration for less than 24.
Exactly, right. Obviously, something that's more than 24 hours is less of a problem. Not for the kli, but for the food. The kli is still going to be also. It has absorbed both from now on. Okay.
Use it for parva, no? But we'll see.
We'll see. Not necessarily. Yes and no, depending. Yeah. Some are machmer. Yeah. But you're right. Me'ikar adin, you can use it. Yeah. Why? Because there's no isur of basar b'chalav in that keli. Yeah.
Right. Because the basar is a return Talmud.
Right. Okay. So that will.
Besides that, the question with is about b'li b'chalav.
Yeah. All right. But anyway, just to make things simpler, because we'll cover that next week in Siman Tzadik Gimel. We spoke about what do we do with this chaylev. So the Mechaber says that if it's not really hot coming directly from the hot wax, all you need is greda. And by the way, you may find the word greda sometimes written grey raw with a resh. It means the same thing. Ligarer or ligror, which means to basically scrape, leshafshef, or ligared, which means to scrape. Same thing. All right. So what is this greda? Nobody really, not too many explain what's involved with greda. Just tell you, just do greda, and greda in this case is enough. Yeah. Exactly. So we do find unique situations, other unique situations like the famous unique situation with a knife, that sometimes if it's used in cold, of course, with some, so all you need is ne'itza bekarka. Remember that? That's stuffing it in the ground, hard ground, that somehow removes any residues of the knife. We're not talking about libun or hagala. We're talking about something less that is required in some situations. So same thing with greda. A good example of greda in day-to-day situations is, let's say you cut a cucumber. Especially if you're Persian, they eat cucumbers for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah. All these cucumbers, for some reason they like cucumbers. Anyway, so he cut a cucumber with a Melicha knife. And now he wants to eat that cucumber with fleishiks. Although they were around, he cut it with a fleishik knife, and he wants to now have it with yogurt. Okay, so it's cold. It's cold, but as we recall from the past, the knife has something called duchka de sakina. And that's important to keep in mind. Knives are unique utensils that do not always have the same din as spoons and forks, depending on how it was applied. Cutting is sharp. The same is true with vegetables like radishes and onions. Because it's a davar charif, we will see later on, it's something hot, spicy, sharp. The din may be a little bit different. And when you combine duchka de sakina with a davar charif, then you even have a bigger problem. Okay, so anyway.
And also, just to remind so much,
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. When you have something that's pogum, what Elon is saying. You can have some spices that transform that pegime into something that's really edible.
Even though it's enogam.
Even if it's enogam. So it's a very, very tricky situation when you're dealing with hot foods. Rejuvenation. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So anyway, so we said that there's a little bit of machlekes of what greda is. So some say, so getting back to the cucumber, what would you need to do is just to be megar, do greda to the cucumber in order for you to be able now to eat it with your favorite food.
So that's less than kedai?
And according to most opinions, as we see, it's less than a kedai klipa.
Right, with what utensils? Because you had it cut with the Melicha.
No utensils, you can do it with your hand. With water. Just scrub off a little bit with water the edges of where the knife cut.
You can simply use a parva.
A parva, of course, you can. Yeah. Exactly. You can use a spoon even.
Some of the stores.
Exactly. That's what we do. We spoke about it. You weren't here. We spoke about fish that's being cut with a knife of a not kosher knife. All you need to do is cut the edges or scrub off the edges and rinse it thoroughly with water. Yeah. That's great though.
They take these cages, they sell them again.
Oh, must be Persian stores again.
Yeah.
What are they doing?
They sell the edges that were cut.
Yeah.
Anyway, it makes for good bait if you're into fishing. Yeah, it can be useful. Right. All right. So we had some questions about the shach and how he holds, because here he says that you don't need a klipa. I mean, all you need is a greda. It's not considered irui over here when it's coming off the solid candle. It's not considered irui, so it's daibegreda, right? The problem is the shach himself says that greda is klipa elsewhere. Greda is basically a klipa. So what does he hold? Yeah, and he holds anyway that you need a klipa even b'mokom shenifsaka kiluach. So there's several questions on this shach over here. Why does he say that greda is sufficient? Meaning to say that you don't even need a klipa. So the Minchas Yaakov, I think it was, explains that there's a difference between what is affected. Is a kli affected, or is food affected by the irui? If food is being affected by the irui, you need a klipa, because usually food is more absorbent, it's softer, and you can easily remove the klipa. By keli is not so absorbent. All you need is grade on what is grade of. And that is a machlokes too. Do you need to remove a part of the keli? Or like most poskim hold, including the Chazon Ish, the grader really means not even removing anything, but just scraping it off, scrubbing off from the keli a little bit of any. So a little bit of what do you call it? Residue of the chalef fell onto the walls of the inner or outer walls of the keli, and it's not from the mehutach. It's from the solid part of the candle, which is like a kiluach, like a nifsaka kiluach. Then all you need is to scrub off like you would scrubbing off wax that dripped on a table or something. Just clean it well, scrub it off, and you're okay. Especially if this is a keli that is not wooden, where you're going to have a hard time removing a part of the keli. What are you going to break it? I mean, it's metal. You can't remove a part of the keli. So therefore, even though the Chavas Das is the ones that says you have to remove part of the keli, we don't hold like that. We hold, for the most part, greda means to scrub off from the food or from the keli. In this case, however, we're talking about a keli. So that's all. That's all you would need to do.
I don't know if it's a good time to ask it.
Go ahead, go real quickly. Yeah.
Often I have a window you can look inside and see
Right.
what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
What's the spin of that window? Is that considered fair?
Yeah, but it's not affected, because all it's getting is a little bit of the vapor. It's not even getting the zayah so much.
So you don't have to worry about it?
You don't have to worry about it. Because
Same thing in a toaster oven?
Yeah, it's not coming directly in contact with the food. It's going all over the place. If anything, that which is above.
You wipe it up.
Yeah, you wipe it off and it's completely okay. Yeah.
Aluminum foil just
Then you're even better. If you can cover any food that you can cover in an oven is a big advantage, because then you can even use it during the same day. Yeah. Or if the meat that you always cook in that or bake in that oven is always covered, then you don't even have a problem to begin with. When two things are covered, you can actually have them at the same time in the same oven. So yeah, better two of them covered than one. Anyway, so now let's go to the very interesting detail. Now that we just reviewed a little bit the halachas of irui and kli rishon and kli sheni, what's the din? There's a long taz here at the end of Tzadik Beis in Basar that goes into the sugya of a matzeket, as it's called in Hebrew, a ladle. A ladle. In other words, you take soup. Usually, you don't take the soup. You don't pour it in the pot, into another pot, or into the bowls.
In other words, is it a kli rishon? Because it's on the fire.
Is it a kli rishon or is it a kli sheni? Take out. What is the din of that matzeket? So the Taz goes through the whole sugya and bringing down the various shitas, and he says like this. I mean, he doesn't really necessarily paskin so much as bring the whole question, the whole problem, and where it affects. Obviously, he leans more towards that it's a kli rishon, and I'll tell you why. He brings down towards the end a little bit more the Tosas that holds. Is it the Tosas? Yeah, it's Tosas in Avodah Zorah. That shita in Tosas is machmir to consider because of the suffix of what if it's a kli rishon or kli sheni to be machmir that it's a kli rishon, which means that you don't use that kind of hot water in a matzekes for melicha sa'of, for that chicken that we spoke about before, removing the softening the feathers, removing it because of the problems of what that causes to melicha later on. However, he says, I'm machmer not to consider that matzeket a kli rishon and consider a kli sheni. So in other words, that I can't use it for agala purposes.
Okay.
In other words, I'm taking the safe side. That's shita. It's a suffix. I treat it like a kli rishon that I'm not going to pour it on a chicken, but I treat it like a kli sheni that I can't use that water anymore for purposes of hagala.
Practically speaking.
Yeah. Right? It's not hot enough.
Why would you want to pour the hot water on it still has feathers? That's the idea here.
No, that has nothing to do with Shabbos. Remember, the chicken is a problem with Melicha. Melicha sa'of is not a problem with Shabbos. It's a problem with Melicha. I may not be able to do Melicha if I did that already. So you shouldn't do it. It causes a problem with the blood.
Okay.
I may not be able to draw out any more of the blood through Melicha. That's the problem. That's the whole issue there is about
so
that.
have I cooked the chicken?
Exactly. That's all. Nothing to do with Shabbos.
Right. But actually, you have two things here. So you have the ladle, that's a suffix.
Right.
And then you have irui kli, that is also a suffix, whether it has the same kli.
Sure.
So the chayra there would be a tzad to be equal with respect to.
Yeah.
In the Hagala, you have to do a big
The Ramah makes a chiluk between nifsak and nifsak.
In the Hagala, you just have to do Hagala. You have to immerse it in a bigger pot.
Lechatchila, no, ideally, yeah. Ideally, it doesn't have to be a ladle. It could be a pot of water, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a ladle, but you're removing it from the source of the fire.
Would it help to use this for ladle?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Remember, there are situations on Shabbos. Right? And that's what we're going to be talking about soon with the Mishnah Berurah. So, that's what we're going to get to. I just want to give you first, just really quickly go through the shitas, and then how the Mishnah Berurah, how this can be seen in the Mishnah Berurah in Shin Yud Ches and Reish Nun Gimel in actual real life situations. Okay, so we saw the sheet of Tosas. The Rosh, however, is of the opinion that nothing really changed by drawing that water in a matzekes of sorts. It continues to retain the status of a kli rishon. Bein lekula, bein lechumra. However you want to use it, for agola or for melicha sa'of, it makes no difference. That's the Rosh. And that's b'shem Ari, I think. The Rosh b'shem Ari. Yeah. Now the Taz just finishes up over there, and as far as the Trumas Hadeshin saying that once you've taken out the kaf, it may have a din of kli sheni. He says you can't really learn from that Trumas Hadeshin because that Trumas Hadeshin is talking about the status of the kaf once it's empty of liquid. That's just another little detail. He says, well, as far as the Trumas Hadeshin saying that he has a question on that, he says that don't learn from that because that scenario is only when that kaf, that matzekes, is empty. Would it have a din of kli rishon or a kli sheni? He says, that I can understand, he says, why this would be a kli sheni, because over there, once it's empty, it's like taking a kli rishon and emptying it of its contents. The pot, no longer on the fire, is no longer kli rishon, without any contents. It's the same thing with a kaf. He says, so don't use that. Trumas Hadeshin, as an example, he says, because once it's empty, it's not the same. And of course, over there, the Trumas Hadeshin had a big nafkamina. What the din is, because if you say it's a kli sheni, then there's no chanan. If there's any isser there would be no chanan being produced in a kli sheni. So that's where it would make a difference. Yeah. All right. Now, just before we get to the Mishnah Berurah, the Chazon Ish, in explaining what the suffix really is here, he says like this. Chazon Ish does a very nice job in explaining what is happening to the matzekes. On the one hand, he says the matzekes being in the water is connected to the same source of the water. Right? Especially, we're talking about that you're holding it, we'll see the Mishnah Berurah, especially if you're holding it for more than a few seconds. You're not just taking it out. You're holding it. So it's the waters of the pot are basically the waters on the matzekes. So the Chazon Ish says that's part of the suffix. On the one hand, he says it's basically one thing. It's the same thing. The two combined together. On the other hand, the Chazon Ish says you can make the claim that only food that is in the Kedera ala Eish is considered a Kli Rishon. That which is being cooked ala Eish. Whereas that which is removed from the Eish, maybe is not. See, so that's basically the suffix here.
At the very least, you have a din of an erosion, the ladle.
Yeah.
If you're going to compare it to food in the pot that's cooked.
Yeah.
So if you're removing it,
well, that's what the Chazon Ish is saying.
The
Chazon Ish. Well, that's the question, because it's not really Irush and Nifsak.
Because you remove.
Yeah, you remove it, but it's why should it be any different than a Kli Rishon that you removed from the fire? Once you put a matzekes, you hold it in, it's filling up with hot water, right?
Because I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Because the matzek is not itself on the fire directly. It's
that's what the Chazon Ish says. That's the suffix. Exactly.
It's in the pot.
Is it?
So it's like a potato that's in the hot water.
Right. So that's what the Chazon.
Worst case scenario, it's like the potato that's in the hot water.
So that's what.
So if I remove the potato from the hot water, it's like if I pour out the liquid, the soup that's in the pot.
Right.
So the worst case scenario, it's an irui. Once
Right.
I removed it from the pot, it's like an irui. And since it's no longer connected to the contents of the pot because it's a solid,
right? So that's
a nifsak kilua.
But when you put the ladle in,
right.
okay,
Sure.
and whatever is below, right, when the ladle is in, the bottom now heats it like.
Yeah. Well, that's
It's
more.
no different than the liquid that's in the pot.
Yeah, that's the suffix. The Chazon Ish in explaining what is the suffix of the matzekes, or this ladle, says on the one hand, we can say it's not the same like food being cooked directly on the fire.
It's not like the pot itself.
It's not.
It's not like the pot
Right.
itself. The pot is standing
It's
on the pot
separate,
directly.
exactly. On the other hand, once you put the ladle inside and you have water coming into it, it's basically connected to the same water.
To the same water, so it can't be worse than the water. It can't be more humeridic than the water it's connected to.
It can be what?
If you're comparing it to the water, and you're
Right.
saying it's no less humeridic than the water, it can't be more humeridic.
No, it won't be more chumadic than the water.
Why?
No, it's either the same, Kli
As the
Rishon,
water.
right? Or it's a Kli Sheni. That's the question.
But like the water.
Yes.
But once you remove the water from the pot,
It's still, but even though you removed it from the pot, you lifted that
now I'm
ladle.
talking the water. When
Yeah,
remove
but
the water from
you
the pot-
removed the ladle with water in it.
No. I'm saying, now you removed, we're talking the ladle in the pot,
Right.
in the water, is no less an issue than the water in the pot itself.
And the water in the pot itself at that moment, Allah H is a Rishon.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Now when I
How
pour,
could it be worse than a Rishon?
Right.
Now when
In
I
the fire itself?
You know,
on the fire itself. Now when I pour the water out of the pot,
Right.
that's like moving the ladle out of the pot.
maybe, but that's the suffix.
So it's an irui. Now I should have. If I'm saying it's as bad as the water in the pot.
It's like a Kli Sheni, maybe. Not even
What-
not even an irui, because it's not connected.
It's an irui
Which is more like a Kli Sheni.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm just
Exactly.
saying.
Yeah, you're
If
right.
you're going to make the parallel, then
All right,
that's the
sure.
parallel.
Anyway, so anyway, so that's the suffix in the Chazon Ish. He's telling us what is the suffix. Is it more like this or is it more like this? All right. The Taz, however, his angle of attack is a little bit different than the Chazon Ish. All the Taz says, listen, the fact is, I can show you from Siman Tzadik Dalet says when you put a spoon, a Melicha spoon in the fleshke pot, that what happens over there is the hot water is so hot that it's maflit the tam of the spoon into the liquid. That's why we aser, right? We aser the contents of that pot, or it may be aser, because the water is so hot as to remove.
That's why we do halkala.
Right. So therefore, what really is happening, the Taz says, is if that water is hot enough to cook the spoon, that's what he said, to cook the spoon, to draw out the tam, then maybe it's a clear rishon. In other words, from that example in Tzadik Dalet, where we see that it affects the spoon being in that water is actually being heated up so much to emit its tam. So if that spoon is being heated up so much, that spoon becomes a clear rishon.
I hope Olam Haba will have a chance to ask on this.
Yeah?
Yes.
What kind of a question?
Because water in a pot has the koyach to draw up the tam of anything in that pot.
Okay.
Also of any food put in that.
Right.
But the fact that it's the koyach to draw out the tam doesn't make it the food in that pot any more.
No, we're talking about in the matzeket, right? In the ladle. If the ladle is going to become so hot as to be able to emit its tam into this water, if it was a matzeket.
Anything else I put in the water, the same thing happens? What can I put into that?
No. So the ladle is becoming, all he's saying is that the ladle is becoming so hot that it basically gives off its tam.
And what could I put into that water that would not give off its tam? If I put a piece of meat, a potato, a fish, whatever,
anything, exactly.
But the fact that it gives off its tam doesn't make it a pot on the fire.
Okay.
It makes it a food in a
right,
pot.
Right, that's why it's a suffix. That's why it's a real suffix. That's the way Chazon Ish put it. But I was just saying that Taz explains it a little bit different, that it becoming so hot as to remove the tam, that perhaps it continues to be like a clear rishon, just like the pot itself. All right, that's the suffix. Now comes the Mishnah Brura. So going into, now that we understand the sugya, the Mishnah Brura says in Shin Yud Ches that Yesh Oimrim, over there the lashon is that the Yesh Oimrim, there is an opinion that those who draw water out from a pot with an empty ladle of sorts, that ladle has the din of a clear rishon. He says bifrat, especially if you hold it there for a few seconds. That's what he says, especially ad shemaleh retichot. In other words, it's boiling. You're holding there, and it's right. Some say, he says, that it has a din of a clear rishon. Okay, that's all. So he says, be careful with it, with that water in that ladle. Now, in Siman Reish Nun Gimel, in actually two places, he says that there are times that you can be lenient. What are they? You're allowed to pour from the matzekes on top of a tafshil, a liquid tafshil, even though that liquid tafshil is completely cooled off. Remember we said before, a liquid that is completely cooled off can be a problem.
No, we're talking about Shabbos again.
Shabbos. This is also Shabbos. It may be a problem. It's completely cooled off. You don't want to reheat it. And here you're pouring from a clear rishon, even if it's only klipa. Klipa is a problem. It's a problem. Klipa is a problem. Irui. So he says, but over there, he says you're allowed to go ahead and do it. Why? Before he said it's like, some say it's like a clear rishon, how could you pour it on liquid that has cooled off completely, the tafshil? You're not ordinarily allowed to pour from a real clear rishon on liquid that has cooled off.
Of course not. That's exactly our problem
right.
with Yore.
Exactly. Right.
And cold milk.
However, it is understood from the Mishnah Brura that any time you have additional tzirufim for heter, additional leniencies, you can be lenient in this case. What will be the additional leniency in the liquid that has cooled off? That some say, ein bishul achar bishul b'davar lach. There are shitas like that. And since the matzekes is bechlal a suffix, if it's a clear rishon or not, it's not for sure. It's just yesh oimrim. So, okay, can I pour? Yeah, in this case you can pour into liquid. You're not allowed to pour it from a clear rishon. Yeah, but because this liquid is in itself not necessarily an isur, because there are some who hold ein bishul achar bishul b'davar lach, so you can do it.
So it would have to be on the condition that other liquid is heated up.
Yeah, previously cooked.
Why wouldn't you usher it because of Maris Ein then?
No,
when someone sees you pouring it in,
people see that you're eating something that it hasn't been
cooked.
cooked.
How does he know that it was previously? Let's say you have a cup of milk.
Right.
A little milk in a cup. You want to have milk with coffee, and now you're pouring in the
milk is different, and there's a problem. Milk.
Yeah, but maybe the milk was previously cooked. Could have been a milk that was previously. So according to this, you would be allowed to pour in the hot water out of the lid. But someone might see you doing that, take cold milk out of the refrigerator and pour as well.
Yeah, usually milk is not cooked. We're talking about something that's a tafshil. His example is with a tafshil. The tafshil, there's no maris ayin. It doesn't say that there should be a Maris Ayin. With milk, maybe you're right. That would be a good... Excellent point. I didn't think the milk was pasteurized. Yes.
Not everyone holds this pasteurizing is cooked.
Yeah, depending on what level of pasteurization was done. Yeah. Okay, but good. Thank you. Good point.
But now a different point altogether.
Right.
Just like I'm not allowed to take something that was previously cooked and put it back on the fire.
Right.
Oh, there's no bishul achar bishul.
That's Maris Ayin.
Exactly.
That's completely Maris Ayin.
Exactly. So why wouldn't I have an equal Maris Ayin with respect to taking something in the ladle and pouring it?
Because because of what the Mishnah Berurah said, there are times that you can be mitzar because the matzekes in itself is a suffix. If it's a clear rishuk, only because of that. Only because of that. But anyway, what's the other example? Real quickly, the other example where he says that the matzekes can actually be helpful. In other words, it's a little bit of a different example. Where the matzekes could be helpful is if you want to put bread, croutons, into your soup. That soup, that bowl of soup, is a klisheni.
For sure.
Now, klisheni can be a problem, we said before, with two things. Kale abishul, things that go quickly, plus, if you're choishesh, with the problem, of course, of bishul achar afiyah. Because even though there's no bishul achar bishul, this was already baked and not cooked, but we're machmer. That yesh bishul achar afiyah. So there could be a problem of something that even though it was baked, you're cooking it now. However, he says, if you use a matzekes, that soup in the bowl will be a kli shlishi. So he says, if you want to put bread into your soup, croutons and things, he says, please use a ladle. Because if you use the ladle, which most people do anyway today, I think, use a ladle, by the time the soup gets to the bowl, that soup will have the status of a kli shlishi, and you should have no problem putting. That's why I tell people there's no reason to be machber, to put croutons, challah, or anything. You don't want to put matzah into your soup for other reasons on Pesach. That's for other chumras. But to put croutons or challah or anything into that, pretty much into that soup bowl, when you've used the matzekes, should be no problem, because by the time you have used the matzekes and the liquid has come to the soup bowl, that liquid in the soup bowl, that soup is considered a kli shlishi, and therefore the Ramos, the Mishnah Berurah says, in that case, you want to use it, because even though you have those chashashim of kalei abishul, nevertheless, in this situation, because the matzekes can be an additional kli, you could be mekel. So this is another example where he's mekel, but here it's in a different way. He's mekel to consider that a kli, because the other issues are only chashashim. They're only chashashim, kalabish and so forth. So here, it is possible that this is another keli. If you use the matzekes, you're safe. Okay.
Quick question: is there a din of klirishon by the pot?
Yeah.
If I have some kind of vessel here, where I'm heating food up in the microwave, does that vessel have it?
No, I don't think so. It's a good question, because it's not setting on the fire all the time. You have
What's
raised the
heating it up
temperature.
is the food inside the pot, because food is getting heated. Food heats up the pot.
But yeah, the whole technology is a little bit different. Nevertheless, it's very, very hot, and it would still.
The container usually doesn't. The food inside does.
The food inside, yeah, the food.
Yeah, inside, but the container usually
And on Shabbos, you wouldn't be able to use it anyway.
That's true. I'm talking about the
Basar b'chalav, yeah. You would have to be careful, with this. Anytime you have this elevated type of heat of yatzal or more, it could be an issue. In Basar b'chalav, in Yisur v'heter, or in Shabbos. So you have to be careful regardless. But once you're dealing with kli shlish, as we said earlier on, the kli itself has the power to cool off, and even if it's still very, very hot, usually you're safe.
Oh, and is microwaving called fish?
For what purposes?
Let's say it's a Shabbos. If I have a timer. But
No,
it's
you
a
can't.
different
No, it's a
topic.
different. No, you cannot. You can have a timer. The Moshe Feinstein says has a tshuva in that. You can have timers for cooking. Otherwise, all your cooking will be done on Shabbos. That you can't do.
No, but I'm saying by microwave, is it called cooking?
Well, sure, and yes.
Because cooking normally is on fire.
Yeah, I
Because
see.
of
Because of the question of fire, it's a different form. Well, obviously, it would be a different form. A teloda, electricity, a microwave. Yeah, well, that would
Microwaves, it's
be that it would be a different kind of heating. You're right. That would be.
Like you're allowed to cook in the sun on Shabbos.
Yeah.
I mean,
But not on that which has been heated.
right, that's
Right.
something else. But you're not cooking. And
Exactly.
microwave is more similar to the sun.
More of that. Yeah, that would be an interesting
We
question.
do it on Shabbos.
Yeah, but either way, you can't do it.
You're going to have a Marzai.
Chachila, you can't do it anyway, whether it's a Durabana or a Duraisa. It makes no difference.
No, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to use a timer
Yeah,
to
right.
create a bishul.
Right.
But if this is in the din of
Oh, I see.
you
Oh,
have
you
to
use a
heat of
timer.
sun.
Yeah, But it's the act of bishul that's being done for you.
That's what I'm saying.
That's the
So
problem.
in the sun, you're allowed to.
Moshe doesn't say
You're allowed to take a raw egg.
you can't use a crock pot. I mean, you can't use anything that's electrical even to cook.
But that's because you're using the electrically generated. You're not using electrically
But
generated.
what's being done is bishul. Bishul is not allowed.
But
on
that's
Shabbos.
but you can cook in the sun, in the heat of the sun. You can take a raw egg,
Right.
put it on the rooftop, and
Yeah.
let the sun turn it
Yeah.
into.
Yeah.
So you're allowed to cook in the heat of the sun
In that way, yeah. If it would be done that way,
because it's
yeah.
not fire.
Right.
Because the isser of bishul is an isser of
Yeah,
transforming.
the
it into
transformation
something
to something
like
else
fire.
through
But
the
you
sun.
can't use special solar teapot.
Yeah, yeah,
You can't use the
Yeah.
solar teapot. I don't know
Yeah.
what a solar teapot is.
yeah.
They make
What is a solar
specially formed glass
Right.
that will concentrate the sun
Uh-huh.
and form a certain way.
Yeah.
You can't use it.
Yeah,
Uh-huh. And why not?
yeah,
And why not?
To start with, you have a problem with mush.
yeah. Yeah, but that's a whole separate problem. Yeah.
The glass itself is a certain way.
Let me ask you differently. Let me ask you differently.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you can use it or not. For what? Maybe to store something.
Yeah.
If you were to use it to heat up water, would you be in violation of the isser of bishul? You'd
Yeah.
be in the violation of isser
No, you
of
would.
bishul.
You would not. No, you would not. No, he didn't say that. No, you.
No, I asked
In answer
him.
to your question, the answer is you would not be. It's
It's
awesome.
not a
Yeah.
question of whether it's not.
No.
There's many things that are asked.
Yeah.
Are you in violation
No.
of bishul?
The answer
That's
is no.
question.
No, the answer is no. No, the answer is no because of the way bishul takes place. The way bishul takes place, according to her, is through the means of fire. Obviously, so anything other than that is either a drabanan or is complete or is mutter, like you said. Nevertheless, there are other reasons of why a particular ma'aseh would be also to do on Shabbos, whether it's marasayin, whether it's similar to the real thing,
Like the-
whether it's a suffix.
The hot water is
and
a
therefore-
failure.
Yeah, exactly. And therefore, like you said, we don't do it. Okay,
The hot water is a failure.
yeah, we'll stop here.